NFL doesn't have news stories that are interesting for everybody else, right? And I'm not trying to put that against the NBA or the NHL or the others. It's just the truth, right? I mean, right now, what do? The Super Bowl just ended. What's everybody's focus? Free agency. But before we get there, I'm curious about this. So the game had another record, 2 in a row now, where we've broken the record in terms of audience viewership. Now, the numbers are pretty staggering, John. 126 million people watched in some form or another. That's a huge number. It's a record number that they were able to put up. I just wanted to throw out a few numbers for you. So the NBA's biggest ever was the Bulls and the Jazz, Michael Jordan back in the day and all the rest of that. They got a pretty good one, John. They had 35 million. That's not so bad. But how about this? They had to go back to 1998. They haven't even come close to it since. But I had to go back to 1998 for that number. The Celtics and the Mavericks last year, just to give you a little bit of an idea, 11 million. So 136 million, 11. It seems like the numbers are a little bit off here, but those are the numbers. And NFL is still king. It's absolutely amazing. I'll give you one last one for the NCAA. Do you know how far back you've got to go to get the highest ever there? 1979. A guy named Magic Johnson playing for Michigan State and a little fella named Larry Bird playing for Indiana State. That one, John, got 35 million folks watching that. But you've got to go back to 1979 to find that number. So the NFL is still king. It's absolutely amazing the numbers they're able to put up. And I say that as a guy who's been pretty critical of Goodell. Goodell has just been able to ride this ship pretty nicely. They got to change the kickoffs. They got to change how they deal with a lot of things on instant replay and stuff like that, John, just so that they can get the calls right when it's something that could really change the game. But you really can't argue too much with those numbers because they're absolutely staggering. Is there anything the NBA can do, the NHL can do, or Major League Baseball can do, John,
of course,
to get anything
you
close?
You know the answer. Pete knows the answer before he asks the question even, folks. And the answer is do away with load management. Yeah. If the players can't play 82 games or 93 games, whatever it is, then don't play that many games. Mm-hmm. I mean, people that pay for those seats pay to see LeBron James, pay to see Luka Doncic. People pay for the stars. And if they're not seeing those folks, it's not fair. And no wonder people then say, well, the heck with these guys. I bought a ticket for $500 and now I can't even give it away because he's not going to play tonight or whatever the story is. I mean, injuries, we all understand. People have injuries. People even get really worn out. But if that many games wears most of the league players out, don't play that many games. Mm-hmm. You know, then it's just a money grab where you're just selling tickets, but you're not going to put product on the court that people want to see. So, yeah, that's the easy part, Pete. As far as hockey, that's tougher because hockey is a great sport. You and I both played it, but it has not captured the American audience the same way that the NBA and NFL and Major League Baseball have. Mm-hmm. It's just different on TV. Even if you have the puck with the light chasing it or whatever, even if you have that, if you're not used to watching that, I don't know how you get better TV audiences than what you've got right now, Pete. But those men that play hockey, they put it all on the line every night. You don't see them doing load management.
Yeah. No, they're the toughest guys on the planet. They really are because they're not oftentimes as big, especially now as the NHL has kind of moved away from the big goons and the fighting and all the rest of that. They've got smaller. So it's interesting. And there are still a few big guys out there. I'm not saying they're all gone, but you don't have the same brawlers that you used to have, John. That they've changed the game a lot from that standpoint. And that might have hurt them a little bit, maybe to some degree too, quite frankly, because a lot of people liked some of the fighting that was going on in hockey and some of that stuff. Yeah. You ever heard of slap shot? Paul Newman, by the way. But anyway, all right. How about this, John? Free agency, since they are 24/7, 365. How about this? Free agency. Now, I took a quick look. The top 10 free agents this year, 7 of them are wide receivers. Now, I'm just going to go back to my soapbox and say this, John. If I'm a GM of a team ever, I'm going to go out there and say, I don't need to pay a lot of money for a wide receiver because there ain't that much difference between number 1 and number 20 and not that big of a difference between number 20 and number 40. So the fact that those guys are some of the biggest free agents that are going to get some of the biggest contracts, it's going to chew up too much of what they've got underneath in the cap itself. And I think that's a mistake. But there are some quarterbacks. So I'll throw these out to you, John. The quarterbacks, top 2, in my opinion, Sam Darnold for sure, number 1. And I went through the rest of them. It's a kind of a lot of nobodies, except for maybe, and you'd be the right guy to ask, Justin Fields. Is Justin Fields a guy, I know he's in Chicago, now he's been at Pittsburgh, but is he a guy that you think has enough talent to go to the next level as far as where he goes if he gets to the right team? Because he wasn't on the right team with the Bears. You and I have talked about that. They didn't have anybody around him. They had no offensive line to block for the guy. The guy was getting sacked every play. So if he gets to the right place, is he athletic enough and good enough to be a quality quarterback, do you think?
Sure, I do think so, Pete. But you do destroy the player's confidence, and the player needs to get his confidence back. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Sam Darnold, confidence destroyed with the Jets. Yep. He bounced around with a couple other teams, and all of a sudden, you give him Hendrickson, you give him, one of the best wide receivers in the game, yep, and another really, really top quality wide receiver at the other spot. And yeah, you can see the difference it makes. But when you're Justin, can he shake that off, Pete? Mm-hmm. The fact that, the confidence that he needed during these first 4 years of his career or 5 years of his career, it's tough to all of a sudden, if he gets in the right situation, the answer is yes, he could. But otherwise, it is tough. Meanwhile, is somebody going to ruin Deion's kid? Because that kid, Shedeur, is a great player. But if he got the same sort of situation that Justin Fields was in, he might have a tough time getting his swagger back too. Because NFL is just a different level. Everybody's fast or faster. Everybody's big or bigger. I mean, again, you talked yesterday, Pete, about the massive size of the Philadelphia offensive line, the Eagles. They are, I think they averaged, Pete, 6'6" and 325 across the front. And obviously, the big kid from down under that was a rugby player, 6'8", 360. I mean, just blocks out the sun. So you're a player in college football and you come out against a full-grown man like that, it's a whole different game. As our friend Ray Lewis would say, Pete, it's a man's game tonight, baby.
It's true. There's one spot that everybody's finally kind of woken up to, John. It's funny because I'm listening to all these guys, all these pundits that have been around for a long time. You and I have talked about this forever. We knew that the King Henry, would have the kind of year that he had because he's at the right place with Baltimore, right? And he's big and he's fast and he's strong. Saquon, same thing, big and he's fast and he's strong. So now everybody's finally woken up to that. So you got Najee Harris out of Pittsburgh and then Nick Chubb from Cleveland. Those two guys are kind of big, kind of strong, pretty athletic. Those guys would probably be the right guys. The only problem is you start looking at age when you look at Chubb at 29 as a running back. That kind of gets people a little bit, going sideways on that whole thing. But I got a trade for you that I think makes a lot of sense. It could be interesting. Myles Garrett wants to be a free agent. He's probably arguably the most talented defensive end in football, potentially. But he's stuck with the Cleveland Browns, which is why 90% of the people that are listening to us right now, John, have never heard of him hardly, because he's in Cleveland where they don't win. He wants a playoff team. How about you get Debo and a couple other picks from San Francisco and put him out there on the other side of Bosa? You got Bosa on one side, you got Myles Garrett on the other side. I think that defense becomes the number one defense again overnight with some sort of a trade like that. Something that gets him away from Cleveland and into San Francisco. And I think it could happen. And Debo Samuel wants a trade. Send him to Cleveland.
Well, that wouldn't be such a bad thing, Pete. Obviously, Miles, a huge talent, a great personality, and a great kid. But I can think of, at least 6 teams that would benefit from having that guy on their team. And, I think he makes any team he's on better. In particular, you talked yesterday about Hendricks in Cincinnati, the guy on the other side, Pete. I think he would make that better. But from a standpoint of where would he like to be and where would he get not just a better shot at the Super Bowl, but a shot at better sponsorship and so forth, Pete, believe it or not, LA Chargers might not be such a bad spot to have Bosa's brother on the other side.
Either way, you get a Bosa. You get a Bosa with either, so it all works out. I got to tell you, that family, and you and I both know, their father was part of the Killer Bees with the Miami Dolphins back in the day. So that is a talented, unbelievable family. I can't imagine what those reunions and Christmases are like with those guys.